Guys, I don't know about you guys, but I love this introduction. Benny, muchas gracias. Thank you very much for putting this together. I know it probably took you probably about 3 days to do it, but you know what? It was well worth it, brother. Mil gracias. Te aventaste. What did you guys think? What do you think, Sean, about it?
Looks good. Looks good. Where'd you get the picture of me and burgering? I don't
You
remember
sent it to
sending it
us.
to. I did?
Yeah, you
Huh.
sent it. You sent us that picture. Yeah. Chalo,
Huh.
what did you think about it?
I love that, man. Hey, thanks for the picture of me and my old man, Benny. He was my Korean War hero, my dad.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Guys, I don't know about you, but I've been excited all week for this show. And I know I say this a lot, but when I say it, I mean it. And if I'm not excited, I'm not going to say it. But I'm telling you, with Devan Hawkes, this guy, is he a legend or is he a myth? I was telling them before the show, guys, that when I was working Logan Heights Patrol back in 88, 89, all these guys that were getting released from this is in 90 now,
What?
getting released from Pelican Bay State Prison,
I
these
think he's gonna go
hardcore
work out.
gangsters.
Se quedó dormido.
I would always ask them, hey, tell me about Pelican Bay. Who debriefed you? Or who did you talk to? Who was a debriefer? And every one of them would say Devan Hawkes. And my partner, Van Cruz, would say, who the heck is Devan Hawkes? And then I tell him, hey, describe him. You know what? He's just a white dude. I go, dude, is he big? Is he buff? What does he look like? He goes, he's just a white dude. And then about 2 weeks later, Benny, I'd arrest another dude that just got out of Pelican Bay, dude from Sherman. Hey, tell us about, Pelican Bay. Who debriefed you? Who was debriefing? Devan Hawkes. And everybody would always talk about him. And then when I went to GST, Gang Suppression Team in 96, once again, we'd arrest these guys. Tell us about Devan Hawkes. What does he look like? You know, I can't really describe him, but he's a good guy. Nobody had one bad things to say about him. And, you know, when you working at that level, prison gangs, these guys are hardcore, manipulative individuals. But you know what? That's why I'm so excited today, like I said before, to have Devan. But, guys, it's not my job to introduce him. I'm just excited because I had a chance to work with him, around him. That guy's definitely a legend. With that said, Sean, do you have any shout-outs?
Yeah, I got a shout out for one of the guys that works with us down during the hurricane season. Actually, he's one of my lieutenants. He works for Eccles County, Georgia Sheriff's Department. And Jason Burlett, congratulations on getting promoted to corporal. You know, they got a whopping 3,600 population in that county. It's right on the border of Florida and Georgia. It's a small department, but hey, good shout out to him. Man. Good job.
Hey, brother, he watches the show, correct?
Yes.
Right on, man. Hey, congratulations on your promotion. Benny, do you have any shout-outs?
I'm good.
Benny, yes, do you have a shout-out?
No, I'm good.
Oh, you're good. Okay. Chalo, any shout-outs?
Yes. Hey, this past week, the Calexico, it's a big deal for us here at our cemetery. We honor our fallen veterans Memorial Day, and they have a ceremony. But I want to give a big shout out to Aurora High School in Calexico. Their students went out there and helped us the week before, and then to clean the graves of all the veterans. And then we on Monday they also went out there and helped put the flags, the American flag, on each of the graves, the graves there that were veterans. Also to Mr. Humbert Felix's fire science class, they were out there too. They're all high school kids. They did their civic duty. It was great going out there. I know that the Calexico Baja runners used to do that with some of the veterans back in the days, and it would take them like forever to do that. I went last week with them, and within 2.5 hours, we cleaned the whole cemetery up. I mean, we're talking about probably about 40 kids out there went out there. I mean, it was great. And then with, like I said, Calexico Baja runners and some of the vets that were there from the American vets, which is also they're out of Vietnam veterans. We're losing our vets, guys. There's not that many World War II veterans now. I think we have one left in Calexico. Korean War vets, there's a couple of them. We still have Vietnam vets and the Gulf War, Middle East vets. But I mean, shout out to all the vets that went out there and helped us take care of it. It's really dear to my heart.
Thank you, Chalo. And my shout out is to all the military veterans that sacrificed, made that ultimate sacrifice by sacrificing their lives for every one of us, for our nation, for us, for our freedom, and prayers for their family members, the wives, the kids, the grandchildren who never had the opportunity to see them as they grew older in life. Our prayers to you, and thank you very much for your sacrifice. With that said, like I said before, the name of the title of our episode today, Devan Hawkes, the myth or legend. You be the judge. With that said, Benny, it's all yours.
So we might be asking, who's Devan Hawkes? Devan was a special agent with the California Department of Corrections Special Services Unit, Gang Intelligence Operations. Devan retired back in 2011. Devan has debriefed numerous high-profile criminals and prison gang members, leaders and shot callers for the Mexican Mafia, Nuestra Familia, Black Guerrilla Family, and the Aryan Brotherhood. I'm talking about leaders and the shot callers that ended up leaving the gang. He has worked in numerous investigations involving those 4 prison gangs. In addition, he has conducted investigations involving Charles Manson family, the SLA. Remember those guys? They were active back in the early 70s, mid 70s. The Symbionese Liberation Army. Another group was the Weather Underground. Devan has also conducted extensive investigations involving outlaw motorcycle gangs, such as the Hells Angels, the Mongols, and the Vagos. Devan is a recognized national gang expert. After reviewing his bio, let me tell you guys, I can go on and on about him. This guy's the man. Just when we thought that last week's guest, Alejandro Lares, had an extensive and impressive bio, comes along Devan. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Welcome to the show, Devan.
Thank you for having me on your show and for that amazing introduction that I probably don't deserve, but thank you.
Welcome to the show, Devan. Chando, your first question. Here we go. Let's rock
Yes,
and roll.
sir. Let's bring it on. You guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Anyways, Devan, well, like I said, everybody's welcoming you. Welcome. Bienvenido. I know you speak Spanish, and I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'm not going to speak in Spanish because most of our audience, we don't know if they speak Spanish or not. So, hey, Devan, really quick, I thank you for what you've done so far in life and really appreciate you being here today. Tell us briefly about your life becoming a correctional officer with the California Department of Corrections. And I'll say it there, corrections, because when you started, it was just CDC. It wasn't CDCR.
That's right. Before it was just California Department of Corrections. Well, prior to CDC, I grew up in California mostly during my childhood in Folsom, California. My mom worked at Folsom Prison. We then transferred down to Corona. My mom worked at the California Institution for Men and later at the California Rehabilitation Center. And so I spent my teenage years there. My career choice was actually to become a geologist. And I ended up graduating from high school at 16 and started my college there in Wyoming in the course of geology. But I left and went on a mission for my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I was sent to Peru, and that's where I learned Spanish. Peru had just become a democracy, and so it was a new experience for me to be in another country and to associate with such wonderful people.
Sean, go ahead.
Hey, Devan, thank you for being with us tonight. Can you share us your first day out of the academy at the California Men's Colony State Prison in San Luis Obispo?
Sure. Well, first of all, before we went into the academy, we did a 1-week orientation at the prison where we would work. And so I had an opportunity to get to know the prison a little bit before going into the academy. And that also made it when we finished the academy, we actually received our very first assignment and started right away. And so my first assignment was actually working in a dormitory of 90 inmates in a level 2 facility. And anyway, a new experience. We were thrown right into the fire.
Go ahead, Benny.
Hey, Devin, when and what circumstances led you to become interested in investigating prison gangs?
Well, as I mentioned before, I had served as a missionary in Peru, and my intention was to go home and continue my focus on geology. But while I was down there, there was a terrorist group known as Sendero Luminoso, the Shining Path. And this particular group was a Marxist communist group, and they were looking to overthrow that democracy that they had just gone back to. Peru had gone through 2 dictators who got their position through military coups, and now was just back to a democracy. But this particular group was committing many acts of terror against the citizens and trying to overthrow the government. They actually went into a prison in Ayacucho and killed the officers and freed their fellow terrorists. So I decided at that point that I wanted to do something to go against that type of behavior and those type of groups. So immediately upon arriving home, I contacted the FBI, asking them what it would take for me to become an FBI agent. And I was told that my education level did not meet their requirements. They required a minimum bachelor degree and preferably a master's degree. And so instead, I went into the California Department of Corrections with an interest of fighting against gangs and groups that would harm people and society.
Hey, Devin, growing up, for example, you said that you lived in the Chino area. Your mother worked in Chino. She also worked at CRC, so that was Corona, Chino, San Bernardino area. You basically grew up among gang members, right? I mean, you're living in some of those areas. I mean, you got the Chino Sinners, you got the Corona, you got San Bernardino, different gangs. Did you grow up in a gang environment? What was the environment that you grew up in?
Well, we did have gang members in the school that I attended. Corona did have gang members, and it was a little different. Walking down the halls, the gang members would usually hang out on the side of the walkways and mad dog people. I remember that the gang members would gather together and attack some of the athletes that were in my grade. They would do this as a group. But I didn't really have too much interaction with the gang members. I did work at an auto repair shop down in gang territory, but I didn't ever experience much problems with the gang members.
Another question that I have regarding the same subject: what was it about Senderos Luminosos that basically created to turn on the light to say, you know what, if I do get hired with the Department of Corrections, I'm going to work prison gangs? I mean, were they that well organized? Were they predators? Did you see them actually committing crimes against the people there in Peru at the time?
The only experience that I had was as I was leaving the country. I was in a taxi going to the airport, and we went through a gun shootout. And I don't know if those were Sendero Luminoso, but there in the streets of Lima, open warfare going on between the police and a group that was occupying one of the buildings.
Now, another question: who was the first? Now you're working there at CMC East. You're working CMC East, probably working CMC West, probably for overtime, or at working at CMC West. Now, how did you get involved with the prison gang world there at CMC? Before I ask you the next question, tell us what happened. How did you get involved? How did they find out that you spoke Spanish? And how did you? What was your path to getting involved in working prison gangs at the time at CMC?
Well, again, my focus was to work gangs, and that was even before I went into the academy. A friend of my mom's, who was also an employee with the Department of Corrections, knew of this interest that I had and brought over a lot of material about the gangs and the groups that were incarcerated within the Department of Corrections. And so before I went into the academy, I already had somewhat of a knowledge of the groups without having the experience of interacting with them. When I got to the men's colony, one thing that was unique about CMC was that this would, part of it, at least at CMC East, was a protective environment for those who had left the gang.
Yes.
So many of the prison gang dropouts were there. And this afforded an opportunity to learn from them. Some of them were early founders of the gang or early members of it. Some had become victims of their gang from violating the gang rules. But to continue my desire to become a gang investigator, I started to go to a lot of conferences that were offered to law enforcement to train about gangs. I did swaps, I paid the tuition fees, and I would go to these conferences, some of them organized by the National Law Enforcement Institute. And this afforded me an opportunity when the position became vacant for an officer. I applied for it. And because of that background in training, I got the position, and I had only been an officer for 2 years.
Wow.
Tell us about the first prison gang member you debriefed, and how did it go?
Well, since CMC did not really have prison gang members,
Active.
active members, yes,
Yeah.
then I would have to say that probably the first happened at Pelican Bay State Prison after I transferred there in '89. And I don't recall exactly who the first one was because there were quite a few. I can't even recall who the very first one was, but it was quite interesting already knowing a little bit about the background because of the dropouts I talked to and the training. I think there was a little bit of knowledge there to where they had confidence with me, but we improved in our debriefings as time went on, with the way we documented, with our research and our investigations into the information. But I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was that was the very first.
When you were at CMC, was there any interviews with dropouts that stand out in your mind? Because I know you had a chance to talk to a lot of dropouts there at CMC. Mexican Mafia, Nuestra Familia, BGF. I mean, a lot of dropouts. Was there one that stands out when you spoke to him, when you interviewed him there at CMC?
No, I can't think of anyone who stood out. There wasn't an individual who really contributed a lot to our investigations, but most of the problems there were for people trying to get to CMC to make a hit on a dropout. Sleepers, yes. And so I recall one individual who was Aryan Brotherhood, and I'm kind of hesitant to say the name because I don't want to create any more danger there,
Yeah.
but I do remember that an individual showed up at CMC as a sleeper with the intent of taking out one of our dropouts of that gang.
Excellent.
Hey,
Tyler?
hey,
Go
Devin.
ahead.
So you said that, I mean, we're not going to say names, but your whole thing, what you're saying is that there was a guy that was going to go out there and take out one of the dropouts, and it was one of their own gang members, right? One of their dropouts that they wanted to take out.
It was someone who was an associate,
Associate. Okay.
but actually the way we became aware of it was because of the dropouts. They tended to police themselves and monitor everyone who arrived. And if someone showed up that seemed shaky or that they knew a little bit about their background, they would immediately notify us about the potential danger. And when I do say that as far as names go, there are people I will talk about by name simply because they've either become very public about their status as a dropout, or they have since passed away. And I have no problem talking about those individuals.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Devin, I got a question for you. Okay, so there's a set of investigators that do the debriefs. Who picks the person that's going to do the debrief? Does the inmate, or is it staff? And I mean, is it something like, okay, Devin, it's your turn, or how does it work?
Yeah, it doesn't usually work with taking turns, but as an officer, I worked for a lieutenant, and the lieutenant was over the unit, and the lieutenant would usually determine who would take on that case. But if there was somebody that I had a particular interest in talking to and doing the debrief, the lieutenant would usually oblige.
Oh, that's cool. Hey, hey, Devin, real quick, so can you share with us your first day at Pelican Bay State Prison? When your first day there, I mean, what happened? If anything stands out, what happened? How did the staff? How did you feel? I mean, going in there.
Well, I arrived as part of the activation team so this was before prisoners even arrived, almost 2 months before they arrived. And when we were gathered together in a conference room, that's how we all started. And the administrators would come and introduce themselves, tell us of their past, and tell us their expectations. And during that orientation, I was actually pulled out by the sergeant of the Security and Investigations Unit and told that I was being assigned to that unit. And so I started off in the Investigations Unit and didn't complete that orientation. Instead, we were given other assignments of a security nature throughout the prison in preparation for the inmates arriving towards the end of December.
So while everybody's getting the talk and everybody's getting all this and that, you're already working. You guys already have a plan in place, and they're having you go out there and say, hey, this is what we're gonna do. This is what our role is gonna be here. This is what we gotta look for. All that stuff was coming, and this was all new to you, right?
Yes, it was new. Well, for one thing, the prison had not been completed in the construction yet. So we had different contractors there with their employees. And part of our first duties were involved doing background checks of those workers before the inmates could arrive, make sure that we didn't have anyone who had past felonies or concerns to the security of the institution. Before inmates arrived, it didn't matter too much on who was actually doing the construction work. Plus, we had to go around and do checks on the yards and in the buildings to gather up anything that could be used later as a weapon, using metal detectors to make sure we didn't have scrap metal left over that the prisoners could find and become a threat.
So how long were you there doing all this before the first group of inmates arrived?
almost 2 months, at least a month and a half.
Wow. Well, I mean, you would think. I mean, I'm pretty sure the prison does everything different now. Right now, they vet the people that are going to work there before they step ground, or they still do it the same way.
Well, again, during the construction phase,
Yeah.
When we don't really have issues of contact between the prisoners and the employees, it may be a little more lax in that part.
Oh. Okay. So you have another question for you. So please share with us the experience of working at the time in one of the country's most secure state prisons. And can you tell us which is the nation's most documented prison gang?
Well, it was pretty interesting to go to Pelican Bay. Brand new prison, brand new construction design. However, we were told it was patterned after two other prison facilities, one out of Florence, Arizona, the state prison there. And if you look at the pictures of it and compare them with Pelican Bay, it would be quite similar. And the other one it was patterned after was the federal prison, ADX at Florence, Colorado. So both Florence prisons, one in Arizona and one in Colorado. Working in here, I felt very secure with the system and the way that it was designed. It was actually designed to be protective of staff and prisoners. And I really felt safe while working there.
So you feel that it was safer to work in Pelican Bay than any other state prison here in our state because of the construction, the way it was built at the time?
I did at the time. Of course, we did find some construction flaws later. The walls, for example, were prefab walls. And as they were put together, there was a gap in between that they filled in with grout. And this, we found later, was a great place that these prisoners would hide their weapons. And so we would have to make sure to really search well the corners to make sure that it was cement. And of course, the contractors had to come in and do some adjustments with harder material to seal up all the corners.
Hey, Devin, how did you feel going from CMC East? West wasn't a PC joint, but East was semi-PC joint. All of a sudden, now you're going to a level 4. Back then, level 4 was like the highest level back then. I believe it still is. Maybe I'm wrong. I've been CDC for 30 years. But going there, and all of a sudden, now you're amongst the leaders. You're amongst the worst of the state, the killers. How did you feel? And I know that you felt secure because of the lockdown procedures, but there was an open yard, right? There was an area where the yards were open, where the riots, we see the riots, we hear about the riots, we see the videos of the riots. How did it feel being in that environment, coming from CMC, all of a sudden now you're in these are the worst of the worst.
Well, as far as the prison gang members and the most influential associates,
yes,
they were placed in the security housing unit.
Mm-hmm.
However, we did have some members that made it out into our mainline facilities, and that did become of concern because they would direct the gang activity directly right there. And before that, they had to get their instructions from the ones that were in the security housing unit. And the prisoners who were the members would give their instructions and appoint their representatives for the main lines. However, it was not as secure in the main lines, but that's the intent, is to have kind of a step down process. The ones who require the greatest security are in the security housing unit. The doors are operated from an elevated position in which the officer controls the opening of the doors. The inmates do not have keys like at California Men's Colony, where they were allowed to let themselves out once the bar had been released. Again, I felt very secure there.
Cholo Trucker, welcome to the show, my brother. And this question segues, and I don't want you to answer it yet, but it segues into my next question. Sherm, Peters, and especially Pegleg Morgan were always looked as godfathers from a street gang point of view. It's a great question, and Cholo, he's going to be answering that right now. Great question. It segues into our next question, which is this. Everyone talks about Joe Morgan being the godfather of the Mexican mafia. We all know, Devin, that the Mexican mafia doesn't have a hierarchy of a godfather military structure. We know that they don't have that, of that type of structure within their organization. Sure, but we also know that he was a very powerful leader and people looked up to him, Joe Morgan. Whenever you mention the word Joe Morgan, everybody thinks of American Me. They think that he's the godfather. We know that he wasn't, but he held a lot of power within the organization. Can you share with us an interview or conversation that stands out? I know you had many conversations with him, many interviews with him, but is there one that stands out with Joe Morgan that you can talk about?
Well, that is a great question, and especially in the term Godfather. The Mexican Mafia kind of patterned themselves after the La Cosa Nostra, the Italian Mafia, at least by name, as well as the symbol of the Black Hand. The Italian Mafia was looked at as the person or the group to have an example. The Mexican Mafia did not have that kind of structure. They didn't have a godfather, consigliere, and all that. Instead, all the members were considered to be brothers, all equal in rank. However, there were individuals like Joe Morgan and Topo Peters who seemed to gain a lot of command amongst their membership, a lot of respect because of their influence and because of the way they carried themselves. Joe Morgan, he established some of the very first connections with the cartels in Mexico. And because of that, he gained a lot of influence among the members because of those drug connections. He was white. Actually, his family came from Europe. And he spoke fluent Spanish, and he was well respected, and he was close to several of the other well respected members of the Mexican Mafia. He, over time, ended up becoming so influential, and I think probably the term Godfather was more applied by the correctional staff because of how much influence he had amongst the other members. And then this title kind of was assumed by some of the other associates, especially, to where they looked at him as the leader of the Mexican Mafia. But again, all the members were supposed to be equal in rank. But you know that Morgan was a leader because he ended up dying in 1993 of cancer, and it left a huge vacuum. The question was about my interviews with Joe Morgan. We had several times that we were able to communicate, usually in my office, and I found him to be very respectful, and he had a lot of authority. I mean, you could tell by the way that he portrayed himself that he was a man with authority. But again, he was very respectful. And my dealings with him were actually positive. I did a lot of investigations involving him, involving his visitors. And I documented a lot of cases regarding him. But again, no Godfather position in the Mexican mafia. However, one thing I think that's important to point out is that when he died, there were several Emmy members who felt like they should be his successor to actually have a more command role within the gang. And Topo Peters was one of them. Cuate Grajeda. And there were a couple of others who felt like they should be looked at as leaders. Tupi Ruben Hernandez was another one. Topo Peters and Tupi Hernandez are now deceased. But it caused a problem within the Mexican mafia. There were factions fighting against each other, disrespecting each other, politicking against each other, which is considered against the gang's rules.
Devin, was Joe Morgan? Oh, go ahead, Chano.
No. And since she brought up so Morgan passed away. You said in '93, right?
Yeah, I think it was in 1993. It was just after he was transferred from Pelican Bay down to Corcoran because of his illness. Corcoran actually has a medical treatment center. Pelican Bay does not have that. And so prisoners who become sick at Pelican Bay usually end up getting transferred down to Corcoran, where there also is a security housing unit. And they can have the security as well as the medical treatment.
So Morgan passed away in jail, right? In custody.
Yes, he passed away in custody.
So you never got to see him after the movie American Me came out? Because it came out in '92.
Yeah, he didn't go down in '92 to Corcoran. He went down in '93. He died, I think, within a couple of months after his transfer down.
Okay. So you guys never saw him again. You never talked about the movie. Never, how, because I know that a lot of the Mexican mafia members were very upset the way that movie portrayed them indirectly.
We did talk to him about the movie, and he was upset about it, but he was not threatening about it. But he was definitely upset about the movie and the way that it portrayed not only him, but also people that he respected, Cheyenne Cadena being one of those.
Devin, was Joe Morgan, was he a charismatic type of individual? Was he a manipulator? I mean, when he sat down and talked to you, word was out probably that you spoke Spanish. Did he try to speak Spanish to you? Or was he just a stoic type of individual, just business and get me out of here? Or was he extremely friendly? You know how certain individuals are, their ego, they're manipulators. Was he that type of guy? What kind of guy was he?
I would not say that he had an ego, at least during our interviews. He was respectful. I wouldn't say he was manipulative. It was more like just a business relationship, really.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I don't know if you remember Fausto Atilano. He worked with us at CMC East.
Yes.
And yeah, Fausto Atilano, when he left CMC, he went to Chino, and he was working Palm Hall at the time. This is early or mid 80s, late 80s. And Joe Morgan happened to go there. I guess he was not testifying, but going there for a case, character witness. And Fausto was telling me at one time that he was patting him down. As he's patting him down, somehow or another, Joe Morgan asked him, "You're from Mexicano?" "Yes, I'm Mexicano." "What part of Mexico are you from?" Fausto, said, "Hey, I'm from La Chona." And he goes, "Oh, I know La Chona," and spoke perfect Spanish to him and told him all about La Chona, all about Guadalajara. Was he that type of guy? Did he ever try to do that to you?
I would not say that he tried to establish a common thread with me. Mm-hmm. Joe Morgan had been to Mexico many times. When he was on parole, he would go there. He also, again, had those cartel connections, and he would go down there and visit with them while he was on parole. At one point, he even had gone to Utah and stole I think he stole a car while he was in Utah. But we had occasion to speak in Spanish. It was kind of funny, you know, two white guys talking to each other in Spanish.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Hey, Devin.
Devin, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hey, Devin. How bad was he? I mean, was he really feared by the rest of the gang members, by the rest of the the group?
He was. He had a reputation, and I mean, when he said something, people listened. And again, he was the guy who probably had the most influence over the Mexican mafia while he was alive. And again, his absence. No one's ever filled his position or level of influence, even to this day. Now that it's been over 30 years.
Yeah.
Dang.
They died. You're absolutely right. Devin, the next guy, Albert Marquez, a.k.a. Bat. Albert had a lot of ties with the Arellano Felix, had a lot of ties from Del Sol, south from San Diego. And Amado Nunez, we're going to get to your questions right now. This guy is in Pelican Bay. He's there with you, a.k.a. Bat, also known as Ding Bat. He's Mexican Mafia validated member. As he's there, he's getting kites, getting information that he's getting ready to get out. He's going to join with David Barron, Popeye in Tijuana. He's going to become a hitman for the Mexican Mafia. I mean, for the Felix Arellano. Well, he's there in custody. Are you receiving this information about him? Did you know who he was at the time?
Yes. Bat, also known as Murcielago.
Yes.
Again, he is from Del Sol down in San Diego. He had a reputation, a reputation of being very violent. There were rumors that he had kidnapped people, took them to Mexico, beheaded them. One story of two girls, supposedly they got kidnapped, thrown in a trunk, taken to Mexico and killed. People knew about him. He was considered a leader amongst the gang members in San Diego. And we knew about that influence. He actually recruited David Barron into the Mexican Mafia. So Barron was actually a Mexican Mafia member. And Barron was different than Marquez. Barron was someone who was very loyal. He was loyal to Marquez. He was loyal to the Arellano Felix organization. Marquez wasn't really like that. He was more selfish. What is in it for him? And he wasn't as much the team player as the individual, but Barron was more of the team player. So the criminal fortune that happened for Barron was that he was in the right place at the right time. He happened to be at the club when Chapo Guzman's people went to go kill the Arellano Felix brothers, and Barron actually saved the brothers, helped them get free. And as a reward for his loyalty and his assistance, he was put in charge of Murder Incorporated for the cartel. Barron was the head of the hit team, and his team were the Logan Heights gang members out of San Diego. And so with that team, he went out and did all the killings for the Arellano Felix organization. And they rewarded him for it. They did make some mistakes. Barron himself was involved in an attack on a journalist in 1997. They shot the journalist. He survived. His bodyguard was killed. Barron was actually hit by a stray bullet fired by one of his own assassin team. And so he was killed. Bat was really looking forward to going out to Mexico to join Barron with the Ariano Felix organization because of the access to narcotics, the access to marijuana, the access to money and power. Bat was really looking forward to this. And I was in communication with task force members out of San Diego, federal, multi-jurisdictional, federal, state, local authorities that were just waiting for Bat's arrival. And so we were coordinating the release, and then a coded letter came in that had been written by one of the associates out in the main line, in which they identified Bat as calling an assault against one of our prisoners. That assault that occurred almost killed the victim. And so I ended up charging Bat for the conspiracy to assault the victim. I referred the case to the district attorney. Bat's parole date arrived, but because of the pending charge, he was held back. The DA refused to prosecute because it was based on just a coded letter, and said handle it administratively. The prison handled it through the disciplinary process, and Bat was given 6 more months in custody. He was very angry about this because he had big plans and he was chomping at the bit to get out there. But that also gave the task force more time to prepare. And communication, Bat was paroled. They had surveillance on him, but within 24 hours, he was over in Mexico. The cartel set him up with a ranch in Rosarito Beach in Baja California. And from there, he established his headquarters. And all Mexican Mafia members who paroled were required to go down to Mexico to meet with Bat, to get their marching orders as far as distributing the narcotics. It was said that Bat had access to bales of marijuana, to barrels of methamphetamine. The cartel was just rich with narcotics, and they used the Mexican Mafia members to coordinate, and using their street gang contacts for the distribution. It was a major deal. I'll tell you that the last time that I saw Bat, he had been extradited back to the United States. He was in a federal courthouse in San Diego. And I was amazed at how old he looked. Here was a guy who was just a little over a year older than me, and he looked like an anciano, a viejo, an old man. And he looked at me, and it seemed like he had no recognition of me whatsoever. He was just there for a motion hearing, so there weren't very many people in the courtroom. Anyway, that's my story about Bat.
Interesting. Amado Nunez, welcome to the show. He says, I'm from South Bay, San Diego. I think Bat would have been much more dangerous if he wasn't a hardcore meth head. Drug addicts are more predictable in a sense. With that said, I know, Big Sean, you have a question for Devin. It's all yours, brother.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Devin, can you tell us about your experiences with Rene Boxer Enriquez?
Yeah, I've known Rene for a lot of years. He came up to Pelican Bay, I think, in 1990. He was part of the first buses that came in. Not the very first, but we interacted several times due to investigations or appeals, or we had opportunities to talk a few times. And he was the subject of several investigations that I conducted, as well as other investigators in my unit. One thing about Rene, I found him to be more pleasant to talk to. He had a sense of humor. He was well read. He would study all the time, grammar, vocabulary. He was articulate. I remember one time, this was when I was a caseworker, and I was preparing his case to be presented for annual classification. And in my interview with him, I said, "What is that big tattoo that you have on your upper left chest? The one with the big black hand and the M in the middle." I knew what it was, but Renee's response was, "That means I'm a great handball player." And then I documented his response and added, "However, this is a Mexican Mafia tattoo." And
Wow.
I guess in later years, when Renee decided to leave the gang, Renee was part of a newer Mexican Mafia. Instead of doing the activity themselves, and most of them being incarcerated, they were unable to go out on the streets and do a lot of the activity. They ran crews, and Renee had a lot of people working for him. They would go and extort drug dealers, and they would send money to him. They'd send money to other Mexican Mafia members, and they would do his bidding. They would carry out assaults on his orders. But he received a lot of money from his people working on the streets. He used to tell me that they helped put his kid through college. So the money went for him, it went to his family, went to his friends. Most of this extorted money from drug dealers. He did say one time that one of the people working for him was trying to extort somebody, a guy who refused to pay, and the guy ended up using wire cutters to cut off his finger because he refused to pay the extortion money. One of the lieutenants, one of the gang lieutenants at Pelican Bay, there were two, one in the SHU and one in the general population. The gang lieutenant in the SHU, Ernie Madrid, recognized Renee's conversations during visits that something was different about him, that he was growing tired of all the politics and everything. Renee was still in good standing with the gang, but that lieutenant approached him and said, "What's going on?" And Renee ended up deciding to leave the gang. And part of that was because that lieutenant was paying attention to what was going on. So Renee talked to Brian Perry, the assistant director over all investigations in corrections. And he said, "I'm ready to get out. I want a debrief." And he says, "I want Special Agent Hawkes to do it." At that time, I was working for the Special Service Unit, and Brian Perry was my boss's boss. And so I was given the assignment to go up to Pelican Bay to work with Ernie Madrid in completing the debrief. Renee was a little offended when I first saw him and said, "I don't believe it." But he continued anyway. And during the many conversations that we had over a period of time, we discussed Mexican Mafia activities and his knowledge and the people. And at the end, I endorsed that he really was dropping out of the gang and moved to certify that status as a dropout.
And he's out now, right? Can you give us the status? What happened and he's out now, correct?
Yeah. Now, again, Renee's a very unique situation. He was serving life without possibility of parole. He had done 2 murders out on the streets. And I talk about this because Renee has been very public about his involvement. A book has been written with Chris Blatchford, him working with Chris Blatchford to tell his story. So I don't think he would be offended to hear about this. But one thing, Rene started to go around and speak to people about his activities in the Mexican Mafia, and especially to train law enforcement about the Mexican Mafia. He, again, very articulate, educated. He was even teaching college classes online. You don't see this usually with a Mexican Mafia member or any prison gang member. So he was trying to make amends for the past abuses. And he eventually won the approval of Governor Newsom to grant his release from prison. And I don't know what the terms are, if he's on parole the rest of his life or for 5 years or what the situation is, but he was released. And as far as I know, he's still under some type of probationary status, parole status at this time.
Well, we wish him the best. I know Benny spoke to him a couple of times, I guess via telephone, I don't know how, or text, and he's promised to be on our show in the near future. We wish him the best. With that said, Sean, you have another question. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, can you tell us about Raul Leon, aka Huero Sherm from Gamma Street?
Yeah, Raul Leon was at Pelican Bay. He also had become a Mexican Mafia member during the 1980s. He actually assaulted a correctional officer in retaliation for an incident that involved another Mexican Mafia member, Acha Michael Eisen. But he was granted Emmy membership and ended up at Pelican Bay. Huero Sherm's another unique case. He is arrogant, and he does have a lot of influence, one of the most influential Emmy members, but not over other Emmy members. It's because he commands a huge force of associates. At one point, he probably had a representative in every facility of all of our state prisons. He was conducting gang activity from his prison cell, using his associates, using his correspondence with people on the streets who would communicate back to his soldiers in the prisons. They were gathering money for him, but he was sharing that money with other Mexican Mafia members as well as people on the street. Again, his influence came with the other Emmy members because he took care of them. One thing, though, is because of all the activity, the assaults that were occurring throughout the state of California, the wardens began to complain to the warden at Pelican Bay, saying, your guy there is creating havoc throughout the entire state, is creating havoc at my facility and other ones. You got to do something about this. So the warden at Pelican Bay, Mr. Stephen Canberra at that time, this was 1996, he asked me to take over an investigation on Huero Sherm. And so I was working again as a caseworker at the time, but I was taken back to the gang unit specifically to work the case on Leon. After 6 months, I was able to gather his network to identify that with the help of other investigators at the other prisons, the visiting staff who would help to identify the people from the streets, other law enforcement individuals. This guy even had a junior high school teacher working for him and passing along orders for assaults, gathering money, redirecting letters. And I even asked one of the California Gang Task Force members with me, a gentleman from Los Angeles Police Department, to please go hit her house, Margaret Farrell's house. And he reported back that she had a trove of communications from prisoners all over the state. She was definitely doing the bidding for Leon. And she ended up getting indicted later, federal RICO case, and they ended up adjudicating that. And she ended up leaving California and going back east somewhere, where I've heard she may be a principal at a school. Huero Sherm, we had the evidence. I wrote a 225-page incident report on it, documenting his network, his correspondence, the assaults. He even later ordered a murder. One of the investigators in the gang unit was able to record that. That was used against Huero Sherm later in a federal indictment, and he ended up getting convicted federally and is serving life without in a federal prison.
So him and Bat are in the same prison now. They're in ADX Florence, correct?
That is correct. Oh, and one more thing. Just before Huero Sherm even made it to the feds, while he was still undergoing prosecution or waiting sentencing, he ended up stabbing another Mexican mafia member who had disrespected one of the great leaders of the Emmy in the federal system. So he ended up stabbing Sammy Villalba, and then recently Sammy Villalba was killed on the streets in Long Beach. I don't know that they have identified who killed him, but Huero Sherm stabbed Villalba while in custody.
Interesting. Benny, it's all yours, brother.
So, Devin, you got the Hells Angels, the Mongols, Vagos, all kinds of different outlaw motorcycle groups, you know, the big ones, doing time at CDC. Who do they align with? What kind of a criminal activity are they associated with?
Well, from about 86 to 88, I was part of a motorcycle gang task force, outlaw motorcycle gang task force. And they actually had their headquarters or their main meeting place down in West Covina. So from the men's colony, I would travel once a month down to West Covina, and I would pass through Ventura on my way. And so I'd stop by usually on Fixed Way and just check out the Hells Angel clubhouse there behind the grocery center. And that was in Ventura. What I found with the Hells Angels is that they kind of had a loose alliance with the Aryan Brotherhood. I say loose alliance because there have been times that they have killed each other. The Hells Angels killed AB member Richard Garner back in 1979. The AB retaliated by stabbing one of those assailants. In the federal system, it's kind of been the same way. It's a loose alliance. Wendell Norris, the head of the AB, one of the leaders of the AB, he had close associates with the Hells Angels in the Bay Area. And probably that alliance isn't as strong as it used to be, especially since the acting president of the Hells Angels in the Bay Area, Irish O'Farrell, ended up getting killed at a bar by an AB member. And at Pelican Bay, we did an investigation on AB members who were planning on killing one of the members, Mervyn Forbes. Forbes had been a Hells Angel member and then became an AB member. And after the killing of Irish O'Farrell, the Hells Angels contacted Moose Forbes and asked him to help in setting up who killed O'Farrell and to try to get retaliation. So again, the Hells Angels kind of have a loose alliance with the AB, but they definitely have a history of rivalry as well. Inside the prison, most of the outlaw biker groups are kind of their own entity. The other gang, Mongols. The Mongols were closer to the Mexican mafia, but then the Mongols started to recruit a lot of the Sureños in the Los Angeles area, even though these Sureños didn't own a bike or even probably knew how to ride a bike. They allowed them to become members. Well, as these Sureños were joining, it affected the narcotic business that was going on in the area. It affected the profits of the Mexican mafia. There was a party in which Bassett Grande members had recognized one of the Mongols, the Sureños who became a Mongol, that this was a person on the hit list for the Mexican mafia. And they shot and killed him. They wounded another Mongol who was with them, and then 2 other Mongols escaped. This created some problems between the Mongols and the Sureños, and the Mexican mafia ended up becoming involved. One of our investigators in the gang unit at Pelican Bay ended up recording conversations in which some of the Mexican mafia member wives and girlfriends came up from Los Angeles and were communicating to them the problem with the Mongols and said, "What do we do?" One of the Mexican mafia members told them, take them out. The Mexican mafia ended up trying to extort the Mongols to pay taxes. I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000. The Mongols refused. I think it was Chris Blatchford that ended up telling the story on the news, on Fox News, and uncovering the whole investigation, and included even the information that we had at Pelican Bay. And I think the Mongols got afraid of that, and no one really wanted a war, and so they ended up resolving their difference. And I believe the Mongols are still closely aligned with the Mexican mafia. David, you may remember at California Men's Colony, we kind of had an embarrassing situation in which a staff member sponsored a bike show that was held annually. And for a while, we were the laughing stock because we allowed Mongols gang members to come into the prison with their motorcycles and participate in a bike show on the East facility yard. And when I had an opportunity to talk to our warden, Mr. Estelle, about how law enforcement was viewing this behavior, he immediately put a stop to it. And that was the end of the Mongols bike shows at California Men's Colony.
I remember I had Snake McIntosh on my tier there in, I believe it was Building 6. I mean, it's been so long. It was Yard 3. I believe it was Building 6. You remember him, Snake McIntosh?
I do. Yeah. The other one, Junior Erickson. I mean, it's legendary, the conflict that's between the Mongols and the Hells Angels. Junior Erickson had killed Fat Ray Peltz down in San Diego. Fat Ray Peltz was Hells Angel, and Junior Erickson was Mongol. And I think there were 4 or 5 Mongols that actually were involved in the killing of Peltz. We didn't have that many Hells Angels that came through. I've met a few of them at CMC and at Pelican Bay, but I think we had probably more Mongols in custody than we did Hells Angels.
What about in Pelican Bay? Did you have a lot of Mongols, Boggles, Hells Angels in Pelican Bay?
We didn't have a lot of them. We did have some Boggles. We had some Mongols. I remember one Hells Angel we had there who actually left the Hells Angels, not as a dropout. He had 2 brothers that were with the Aryan Brotherhood, and he actually had the tattoo removed and had an out date put underneath there The Hells Angels do allow people to leave their gang, but they claim all Hells Angel property, which includes tattoos.
Interesting. Sean, that was your question, Sean. Do you have anything else for Devin regarding motorcycle clubs?
No, I'll catch up. I'll catch him on the next show that we have.
Perfect. Go ahead, Ben. Anything else?
That was actually mine. Yeah, let me share with you what I saw when we went to San Quentin. They had a special yard for high power inmates, and it was the white power yard. They had some Aryan Brotherhood guys, and you could tell by because they had the tattoos. Your typical Aryan Brotherhood tattoo, the clover with the Nazi swastika, and they had Aryan Brotherhood tattooed on them. And there was some guys there with a bunch of Mongol style tattoos. The Vikings, the normal Mongol, I'm not sure, Mongolian fighters. And I was kind of surprised. I was looking at them, and out of that group came a guy, Randy Kraft, the scorecard killer.
Yes.
So he was hanging out with them in the yard. But that's what I saw. I didn't see any HAs. I thought I was going to be able to see Hell's Angels there, but obviously not, because there was probably Mongols in there.
Yeah,
Hey, Devin, what he's talking about is the death row yard. That's what he's talking about.
Yes.
He took us to the site where the kennels are. That's death row yard. That's what he's talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, at the adjustment center. They do have AB members there who are on death row. I'm not familiar with Mongols or Hells Angels in there, but I've never worked that section of San Quentin or at San Quentin, period.
We have, once again, Hector Bravo, the prison guard. He has a statement. Arthur Artie Guzman was also very good at what he did. I conversed with him many times after he dropped out. Did you ever get a chance to debrief Artie Guzman, Devin?
I didn't debrief him, but let me tell you that in 2008, Brian Perry asked me to participate in a new venture. I was asked to go to Washington, D.C. to work for the National Gang Intelligence Center, which was run by the FBI. And so I'd gone back there, and we were involved in a project of sharing information and trying to work out a way to nationalize our information for gang investigators throughout the country. There were some changes in staff, and I ended up getting assigned to Los Angeles to a special federal or multi-agency task force operating in Los Angeles that was investigating Artie Guzman. Artie was very similar to Huero Sherm in that he had a lot of people working for him. He had a huge amount of soldiers working in different facilities. And he actually ended up in conflict many times with other Mexican mafia members. Like I said, when Joe Morgan passed away, left a vacuum, and there were several Mexican mafia members who felt like they should be his successor. Artie Guzman was one of those. Artie had been actually the crime partner of Morgan. And he had a lot of time in the organization, but leadership isn't determined by how much time you're in. We had original members back at Pelican Bay, and they were not as influential as Morgan and some of the others. But Artie used his father. He used the wives of other prisoners to get his communications. He took care of a lot of assaults, very similar to Huero Sherm in that operation. And eventually, as things started to come down hard on him, as well as on his family who were participating, Artie ended up deciding to leave the gang. But a lot of influence there.
Chalo has the last question, but before the last question, MB Plays, thank you very much. Please subscribe to our channel. He says, Devin, we need to get you to present at the biannual Prison Crimes Conference. So you got an invitation, Devin, and we'll find out, see how they could get a hold of you later on. And one more question from him. Newer Mexican member Timothy McGee, Weedu, any thoughts on him?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with him. Now it says newer Mexican Mafia member. I did retire in 2011, so if he's been made a member since then, but I'm also not familiar with him as an associate, so I have no thoughts. Sorry.
Yeah. Chalo, your last question. It's all yours, bro.
Cool. Hey, David, Devin. Woo. Please share your promotion and transition from working at Pelican Bay to hitting the streets as a SSU special agent in Sacramento.
Well, a lot of the gang investigators aspire to become an SSU agent. SSU was the investigative unit for all parolees. There is no parole investigation yet. SSU takes care of it. But in addition to that, SSU is a law enforcement arm of corrections to work the streets. In the penal code, they're in the same section as like the highway patrol. They're 24-hour peace officers, where in the prisons as officers, we were law enforcement, our authority was only while we were on duty. In SSU, your law enforcement authority is 24 hours. So I did aspire to become an SSU agent and to work in the gang intelligence section of that unit. I'd known Brian Perry for many years, and he was the head of all the SSU units. And he ended up giving me the chance. I had gone down to Sacramento to work for classification, analyzing legislative bills, writing classification procedures, regulations for the department, answering correspondence for the department. And then from there, I transitioned over to SSU agent, I think 1.5 to 2 years. And so I stayed with that unit until there was an opportunity at Pelican Bay to go back working a special assignment in the gang investigations unit.
Wow.
Man, Devin, you know what? It's already an hour and 19 minutes. The time flew by. With that said, guys, is there anything else you want to ask Devin before we say goodbye? Anything else? Chalo, do you have anything else for Devin?
No. I mean, since we're gonna get him back.
Yes.
We'll wait till then.
Benny, anything else?
I just wanted to clarify one thing because I know he's probably watching with Rene Enriquez with Boxer. He didn't promise to be on the show. When I talked to him, he said he was going to consider it.
Oh, okay.
So, but he does think very highly of you, Devin. He spoke very highly of you.
Perfect. Well, I apologize. I thought he was, but you know what? If he's considering it, great. We'll have him on our show. He would be awesome. With that, Sean, any other questions for Devin? No. Okay. With that said, Devin will be returning on August 15th and 22nd. And this segments into that. Could you please talk about AB leaders, Blue Norris and Blinky Griffith? With that said, when you come back on the 15th, we hope, Devin, we're going to have the question set up. It's going to be on the Nuestra Familia and the Aryan Brotherhood. And then the 22nd, we're going to look at the Black Guerrilla family, and also, like Benny had said, SLA, all the other groups, terrorist groups inside the prisons organizations. With that said, we're looking forward to having you back on the 15th and 22nd. Devin, any last words before we say goodbye to you?
Thank you, and I look forward to meeting with you again in August.
Thank you very much, brother, and have a great couple of weeks, brother. We look forward to August 15th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. What did you guys think? Chalo, your thoughts?
Man, it's man, I can just imagine the stuff that he saw, what he went through. I mean, and I know, he's a very humble man because when we
Yes.
asked him the question about him, his first, Pelican Bay, what he thought, what was his, and you know what? It's like everybody else that is a seasoned person. You can tell the seasoned person that has gone through a lot because they don't like to brag about a lot of the stuff they did. Everything they kind of try to keep it on the down low, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, he saw a lot, he did a lot. The fact that he got to debrief people. I mean, these people that were running the whole state prison. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, these guys, your shot callers. I mean, they own geographical areas. They command an army of illegal, soldiers out in the field. And so, man, when you can go out there and you get intel on them, and you got the main bosses or the main carnales telling you everything that's going on, and you verify what we already know, or giving us some good intel on the streets. I mean, wow. I mean, I would have loved to just spend a couple of years doing that in my career.
Yeah. Yeah. What an outstanding Benny. Any last words about Devin?
It's just a tremendous career, man. The guy's the man.
Yeah, outstanding. Sean, Big Sean, anything?
Yeah, just exactly what Chalo and Benny said. I mean, you can spend hours and hours listening to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I told you, so is he a legend or is he a myth? To me, he's a legend, man. He's a legend for all of us in law enforcement. He's not a myth, he's real. With that said, 3 minutes, Sean. I know we promised our listeners that we're going to talk about current events. We'll just do it real fast. Current events. Go ahead.
Well, really, it's so far we've talked about officer deaths so far in 2023. We've had 44 deaths so far this year. 20 of them have been gunfire. 6 of them have been auto accidents. Driving is a big thing. I was an EVOC instructor, so driving is a big thing. We've also had 8 canine deaths this year, and this is segueing into what we're going to be doing next week. California's Assembly Bill 742, they want to get rid of using the canines to apprehend criminals and whatnot. And I know that our guest next week will probably have a lot to say about that as well. And being the former commanding officer of the canine unit in our department when I retired, I got a soft spot for that. And I can tell you right now, what they're thinking about in Sacramento, I don't know what they're thinking about in Sacramento to get that passed. I mean, no one has ever died by a dog bite. Let's put it that way.
And that segues into Benny. Tell us who our next guest is next week, Big Benny.
Next week, we got retired San Diego Sheriff's Department Deputy Dan Settle. Deputy Dan Settle served 17 years with the department. On August 27th in 2003, while he was on patrol in the city of Vista, Deputy Settle, along with his ride-along explorer, Brenton Tracy, and Settle had a canine. Urk was the name of the dog, U-R-K. They were ambushed during a radio call. A suspect opened fire on Deputy Settle's patrol car with a shotgun, and Deputy Settle engaged the suspect, and a shootout ensued. During the shooting, Deputy Explorer Tracy was shot in the elbow during the shooting, and the suspect fatally shot the canine Urk. So we got to have him on the show.
Excellent. It's going to be an outstanding show next week. We'll look forward to it. With that said, guys, it's time to say goodbye. Chalo, you're saying.
Make it quick. Integrity means everything, buddies.
Exactly. Benny. Oh, go ahead.
Same thing.
Chalo, you got something else?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
I'm good.
Benny.
As always, prepare for the fight of your life. Fight dirty, get tough, get mean, train, know the job, and remember it's muscle memory when you learn it. Don't hesitate, stay in the fight and survive. And remember, experience comes from our mistakes.
Excellent. Big Sean.
Live tactically and be safe.
And my last one is live a purpose-driven life. Live every day like it's your last, and you're never too old or too young to volunteer. Thank you, and God bless.